people riding bicycles and kids passing by. One of my favorite takes is capturing the train. So one thing about living in Japan is that, like a lot of countries in Asia, transportation is very convenient, especially with the train systems, or if I should say East Asia, it's more convenient. I would say that if you want to buy a car, it's going to be a bit more expensive, of course. So, trying to own a car, having a car, just costs too much money for people here, and it's easier to just take trains. The price of gasoline, and on top of that too, having a car in Tokyo, the price of car insurance and taxes that you have to pay with having a car is an extra stress that you really just don't want to have. Many people just don't need. So preferably it's more better to just ride a train than to take a car place to place. One thing I will say is that the trains are very crowded, and it's extremely crowded, and if you're not used to being in big crowded places, then the train may not be the best place for you. Trains are in every direction. No matter where you walk, you'll always find a train passing by. So that's one thing about Japan, is it is a train heavy country. So if you're looking to live somewhere, preferably it's better to live away from the station, as it's cheaper. Closer to the station, of course, is more convenient, but if you want to save costs, crowded places, just not the kind of place for me. It's a lesson for many people is, if you're driving a car or riding a bicycle, remember that it's on the opposite side, and some of the kanji is very important to know for your own safety. Alright, so across this light, or this pole, I will enter into Meguro City. Meguro City. Meguro, in better pronunciation. A very peaceful and quiet town with lots of things to do. And one thing about Japan is that the roads are so narrow. As you can see, this road is incredibly narrow, and it's not enough room for two cars to pass by. So one difficult part for me about driving in Japan is that, well, which way is the right way? You have a one-lane road. Are cars incoming or cars? That's a very difficult point. Is you see this car driving by, and it's only a single lane road. They both are coming the same direction. So the streets are so narrow. For me, it's hard to even imagine driving in this area. Narrow streets. And if you notice in Japan, people tend to park backwards in the view is absolutely incredible from here, especially looking from above. So I think the buildings down below are Shibuya, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. One of the most notable things, again, is the streets being very clean. Definitely Japanese culture. They're keeping a clean street, clean areas. That can be definitely part of culture. So I truly believe that culture really defines the tone of the environment. It really does set the standard. I think culture takes triumph over laws, rules, and regulations. And so if there's a good culture, you don't need extreme, excessive laws to keep people aligned and obey. If there's a good culture, you don't need extreme laws, because people are able to cohabitate and follow the rules and keep things clean and organized. because of how they're raised, not so much those strict rules and laws. The most biggest thing for me about life in Japan is more of Japanese culture, not so much the rules, not so much the, laws. Because you can have, again, the strictest rules, but if the social environment culture is not good, and if people aren't, caring about their environments, then of course, it'll get dangerous. It'll get dirty. It'll get unsafe. So, culture. Today is literally the most warmest day I've ever felt since being in Japan in the winter. I just have a hard time believing that it's January. It feels like spring. So strange, So as I was mentioning earlier about the narrow streets, I guess apparently when you're driving, you will look at the kanji on the road. If the kanji is facing your direction head on, then you know not to turn on that street because, well, it's a one-way road and the cars will approach you, which is dangerous. So in my direction, the kanji is facing away from me, which means that I'm able to drive in this direction on a narrow road. Now, I've driven here in Japan once before, but I've always avoided going into the one-way streets in fear of accidentally going the wrong direction. So here, as you can see, it says Tomare on the street. So another important thing is that there's not many areas to park. And in Tokyo, it's very rare, if any at all, is there going to be free parking spaces, because it's a big city, it's very crowded, many people, and there's so many cars that there needs to be some type of control on parking, which means that parking will cost you quite a bit of money. So parking will cost a bit of money, especially in Tokyo, and keep in mind that the roads are, again, very narrow, so there's not many places that is easy to park. So if you're driving in Tokyo, and let's say that you are looking for a place to park, you might have to drive to a very far away place, park your car, then get on a train, because there's not many parking spaces in all the areas, and oftentimes the parking spaces are usually filled. So here's an example of the mailman here in Japan who's giving mail to a neighbor. Oftentimes the mailman will ride a little motorcycle and go to individual houses and deliver mail, which is a little similar to the States. However, the postmen here in Japan ride motorcycles, whereas in America you would see, UPS trucks or FedEx trucks, if there is, and they would drive door to door to deliver mail, which is very interesting. So here's another example of a very busy, or another example of a very narrow street. And you see this truck that's parked there in the corner. That truck is blocking the road, and oftentimes cars would have to go around the truck. Situations where when a truck is blocking the road, you have no choice but to go around it, and it's difficult. Another thing that to keep in mind is that for homes that live near train stations or train tracks, they cost significantly more cheaply, or it's significantly more cheaper to live near the railroad tracks, because, well, it's a lot of noise and it's very distracting. So if you're living near train tracks or the railroad, then your rent is going to be much more cheaper than living away from the railroad tracks.
Are these guys professional or are they amateur players? I can't tell. I'm not a soccer player.